17th November 1842. Dear Edgar, it was not until 3 weeks after your departure that I came upon your letter. It had slipped behind the desk, and a guest, chancing to find it, inquired whether I knew of one called Alice. I denied myself, yet said I would see the letter placed into her keeping. It is usual for visitors not to become too familiar with the servants, so what a welcome situation I found myself in with you. Oh, Edgar, what wonderful things you wrote. I am most thankful you left your address, for I felt compelled to write in return. I could scarce endure the thought of never corresponding with you again after the adventures we shared. Father speaks of you often. I believe that, had it not been for your presence, he, and indeed I also, would have found our mourning for Mother much harder to bear. The grief, the loss, the sad valley's restlessness. For this we are forever in your debt, as I think is the whole village. We lay violets and lilies on Mother's grave, and I'll often wander into the forest and stand in silence at the graves there. On a sunny day I'll look up through the trees and just take in the clear azure sky. I know not how long it may take for this letter to reach you in America, yet I trust it shall find its way to you, and that in time I may be favoured with a reply. The winters here in the north of England are cold and unrelenting, aside from the occasional sunny day, though I expect our cold is but mild beside the weather you no doubt encountered upon your voyage home. I pray you returned in safety, and with the protection of the magic we encountered during your visit. You came here a visitor, but truly left as a friend. Forever in your debt, Alice. So Alice and Edgar's tale lives on, and this is just a placeholder letter until I fix my printer. Thanks to the wonderful Priscilla at Release the Crafting for reviving Poevember for another year. Now you may remember that I took part in Creep on June earlier this year, June, funnily enough, and that Tracy had loosely based her prompts on Poe, and I created a story about how Poe travelled to England, met a maid called Alice, struck up a wonderful friendship, and, well, saved the village from werewolves. And I'll link the playlist in the description of this video so you can check out those videos and the story if you missed it. And I was so overjoyed with how popular Alice and Edgar's friendship was that I thought I had to do something with it for Poevember, and I thought that letters would be good. So for Poevember, Priscilla chooses some poems and provides prompts for each one. And you can do them individually or one whole thing for each poem, incorporating all the prompts, whatever you want. And I'll link Priscilla's channel so you can watch her intro video and find out all the details. And I'll link my playlist as well so you can see what I did for last year and hear me reading out the poems for last year as well. Now I will be working in my Poevember journal that I made last year, and I will make a creation for each prompt, but as well as that I will read you out a letter, and they will either be from Alice to Poe or Poe to Alice, back and forth. You know how letters work. And weaved within the letter will be indications for the poems or the prompts themselves. Perhaps Alice gives Poe some inspiration through the words she writes to him, or perhaps he finds his own inspiration when he's writing to her. Either way, the letters lead Edgar Allan Poe to write the poem. So I'll read the letter, I'll then read the poem, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the meaning of the poem and show you what I've made to meet Priscilla's prompts. That sounds a lot, but it'll be fine, I promise. So I'll do one video for every 5 days, covering all the prompts for that poem. So let's get on with it, shall we? And we've heard the letter, now let's hear the poem, The Valley of Unrest. And I've got my book that my mum got me, and my mum also made this bookmark to go in it, so I'm using that. The Valley of Unrest. And I've got my Poe candle, and I've got Sydney Prescott here with the Raven Skull. The Valley of Unrest. Once it smiled a silent dell, where the people did not dwell. They had gone unto the wars, trusting to the mild-eyed stars, nightly from their azure towers, to keep watch above the flowers, in the midst of which all day the red sunlight lazily lay. Now each visitor shall confess the sad valley's restlessness. Nothing there is motionless, nothing save the airs that brood over the magic solitude. Ah, by no wind are stirred those trees that palpitate like the chill seas around the misty Hebrides. Ah, by no wind those clouds are driven that rustle through the unquiet heaven, uneasily from morn till even, over the violets there that lie in myriad types of the human eye, over the lilies there that wave and weep above a nameless grave. They wave from out their fragrant tops, eternal dews come down in drops. They weep from off their delicate stems, perennial tears descend in gems. So I've done some research on the key themes of the Valley of Unrest, and this is how the poem is interpreted from across various sources. So the key themes are death, loss, grief, and the haunting impact of memory on both landscape and individuals. And the poem is steeped in images of death, a valley marked by absent people, nameless graves and mourning flowers, underscoring the universal experience of losing loved ones and the lingering void that remains. An enduring power of grief permeates the valley, with nature itself weeping and unrest persisting eternally. The endless cycle of sorrow and inability to achieve closure are central motifs. References to people leaving for war add themes of violence, abandonment, and the transformation of peace into perpetual unease. The emotional scars of conflict are etched into the valley's character. And Poe uses the valley as a metaphor for internal turmoil, suggesting restlessness and dissatisfaction are part of the human soul's struggle with mortality and existential questions. Nature serves as a reflection of emotional states, with restless trees, eternal dew, and weeping flowers symbolising inner turmoil and unresolved sorrow. And these themes work together to evoke an atmosphere of haunting melancholy, and to explore the profound ways in which grief, war, and mortality shape personal and collective experience. So there are lots of similarities in Alice's letter, which I actually wrote before researching the poem, so a win for me at symbolism. There wasn't a war, I mean there were wars, but we're not talking about wars in our correspondence. But that feeling of loss from Alice's mother dying and then Edgar leaving creates loss on both sides. Edgar will certainly be yearning after Alice and the friends he made, and of course Jupe, his trusty raven. Heading home to a lonely life, he'll definitely be writing poetry based on these feelings of grief. And now I've been chatting for ages with all my preamble, so let's move on. And the prompts for this poem are silence, grave, visitor, azure, and magic. And these are my representations of these prompts. So, using my Poevember book, which I started last year, and I'm just adding to it throughout. So let's find silence whilst Loki scratches himself in the background. Okay, silence. So with this page I've tried to create a lot of negative space, and can you even see it? I'm going to knock this candle off in a minute. I'm trying to be vibey, but it's not very practical. There we go. So I've tried to create a lot of negative space to convey the absence of noise, and the Valley of Unrest treats silence not as peaceful but as haunting, a quiet that almost hums with unease. So I've used lots of white lace and tulle, onto which I've taken the silent part, stuck down the silent part of the poem. I've added some white gesso in the background to quiet it down a little bit, and I've used blacks with this solitary feather using black texture paste, which falls through the sky to the ground in dead silence. And I've used this moth pocket from Priscilla's kit for Poevember, all eerie symbols of silence. And funnily, my husband looked at this page and said, have you put that moth there because if it's like there's one in Silence of the Lambs? And I hadn't, but it's quite serendipitous, so I'll take it as a pop culture reference of silence. Now I used this envelope here with this raven on because maybe the feather belongs to this raven, and I've added the word sullen from some Release the Craft in Poe words, as I feel that when someone is sullen they are silent in a sad way. And on the other side I've sealed it with a white and silver wax seal with a tree on, sealing in words never to be spoken. And in the background you can't really see it, but it took forever to make. I layered some Poe book page, which I ripped and inked and placed in sort of a way to show a valley. So if you can see, they are supposed to kind of be hills on either side that flows into a valley. And then I added this Tim Holtz phrase from the Halloween 2024 sticker book that says, "Seek the silence of the night." And the page in my journal I chose just because it had neutral tones, and then this skull and sculpture in the corner here, again things which I feel symbolise something which is silent in its form like that, but represent things that should have a voice. And if you imagine standing in Poe's Valley, the air heavy, the stillness so deep that you can feel it, that's what I wanted to translate visually. Silence isn't the absence of life, it's the echo of something that once was. And that's my representation of silence. So let's move on to grave. And now I need to actually find the page that grave is in, because I've just dotted things randomly. Here we go. So grave can hold so many meanings: solemn, literal, emotional, symbolic. And in Poe's world, it's not just a burial place, it's the weight of stillness, the threshold between beauty and decay. So this ended up being quite a busy page, but actually doesn't contain very much. So perhaps it's symbolic of the fact that there's a lot going on underground, but above all we see is the grave. So I popped this bit of scrapbook page about the grave of Poe in the background, as I felt that was quite fitting to put on here. And then let's start at the bottom. We've got the part of the poem which talks about grave, mentions the human eye and a nameless grave. So I've got a Release the Craft in page here that I've shrunk down and printed on like a aged paper to mute it a bit, and it's roses with eyeballs on. Yeah, in the middle, so I can work out if you could see or not. And then the skeleton hiding in the background, heading towards the back of the grave. This is a Release the Craft in grave. I've put a raven on top, guarding the grave, some crypt grit paste down here, and with like forest moss, and grave texture paste along the side with forest moss on as well. So it's like the nameless grave is a little bit overgrown with moss. And then I've got this pocket over here, again from Priscilla's kit, and it's got this hand coming out of the ground, and it says dead in the background. And I've added some more crypt paste to blend the pocket into this bit below and just make it more look like the hand is coming out from the ground. And this pocket kind of brings a bit of modern surrealism to the whole piece with this road and industrial nature. And then finally I've got this Release the Craft in tag from the kit with these nuns who look like they're mourners, and then this eyeball in the background. I've added a Tim Holtz moth here for no reason but to fill space, and because moths are a little bit goth, and added this greenish fabric here, which I've distressed up a bit with forest moss, and then back the tag on a faux postcard page as a bit of a clawback to the whole back and forth letters between Alice and Edgar. And I've also purposefully chosen this page here because it sits opposite this page from last year, which was filled with gravestones. So I felt they paired well together, but very different feelings when you look at the pages. So let grave be a meditation on what's left behind. It's not only about death, it's about memory, reverence and transformation. And Poe's graves are never just ends, they're doorways, symbols of the strange beauty and stillness and loss. And the grave, after all, is only a keeper, holding quiet stories until someone comes to listen. Okay, let's move on to visitor. Okay, let's find visitor. I think it's at the end. Let's see, is it this one? Yes, it is. Okay, can you see? So visitor doesn't have to mean intrusion, it can mean witnessing. The presence that disturbs the silence, not to harm, but to remember. And I chose this backdrop from Priscilla's kit because I felt this lady standing here like this was a super creepy representation of a visitor standing, not visibly observing, but aware of the sad valley's restlessness. And I love this background so much, I didn't want to lose it with too much added stuff, so I've kept it super simple and almost exclusively used stuff from the kit. So I stuck the backdrop to a page with faux book page in the background, popped this moth pocket on, and decided at this point I was having something with a moth on for each page for this poem. So let's see if I decide to keep that theme going for the last 2 pages. Anyway, I put this haunted for life Tim Holtz phrase here, as she really does look like she's been profoundly affected by something with her head down like this. Actually, she looks like the girl from The Ring, and I use the word girl lightly. And then I chose this tag from the kit, as it looks like another visitor lurking in the background, and the word despair on it, as the page really does scream despair. I backed it with some Poe page, a bit of Poe origin story, and then added the visitor part of the poem on some of this netting that I also used on the tag. And then I backed it on some more book page, and I quite enjoyed backing book page with book page. I did try and stencil some bats in the background, but you can't see them because I printed it on matte photo paper, so it didn't show through, but it was more because I felt like a bit of a cop out, hardly doing anything on the page. And then I thought about texture pasting bats on, but I worried they might smudge a bit because that's happened before when I've texture pasted bats, so I just left it. Anyway, I really like this page, mainly because it's mostly Priscilla's art and not mine. So in Poe's Valley of Unrest, silence isn't empty, it's full of ghosts of memory. The visitor could be me, or Priscilla as the artist, stepping into that still valley and awakening what lies beneath. Perhaps the valley needed the visitor, not to speak, but simply to be seen again. So let's move on to Azure. So I've just had to move on to the page off at camera because the next page is the next page. I didn't want to spoil it. So in the poem, Azure carries the echo of what once was, the bright blue sky that has since faded to grey. It's the memory of life and clarity now dimmed by sorrow and stillness. So I painted this whole page blue, but intentionally covered most of it up with grey stuff. So let's look at how Azure is described in the poem. So they had gone unto the wars, and one of the tags in Priscilla's kit is this gas mask tag stuck to another one. Well, it's 3 tags, but I made it a trifold. And I put some bits on the top for tabs, and then I backed it and then stenciled some blue feathers on the back to bring in some of that azure blue. Trusting to the mild-eyed stars nightly from their azure towers. So I used this picture of Poe fading into the moon with a raven and the starry sky in the background, and put a bit more of this greenish fabric, blue greenish fabric as a tab. And to keep watch above the flowers, you can very faintly see some roses here in this grey bit of paper from, I think it's from another release, the crafting kit. And I used this silvery grey bit of the raven here with these tree branches. And in the midst of which all day the red sunlight lazily lay. And I've taken this bit of the kit with this red hue in the sky, looking like a red sun coming through the clouds. And I put this moth pocket on here to tie the pages together, and I mixed some black texture paste into some blue paint to make dark blue texture paste to blend the blue skies into the reds and greys. Azure is the echo of the sky that used to be. So in the context of the Valley of Unrest, it's that impossible blue of life remembered, colour haunting the greyness of grief. So I wanted to let my page feel like a moment between life and memory, between the living world and the silent valley. Azure is what remains when the storm has passed, not the sky itself, but the thought of it. So the final page for the Valley of Unrest is magic. But first I better put away my tags from this page because I forgot that it is on the next page. So let's put you in there. Okay, so magic. Ta-da! It's not that magical. So in the landscape of Poe's poem, magic isn't sparkle and spells. It's that strange suspended energy that makes everything too still, too beautiful, too sad. The valley itself feels enchanted against its will, touched by something unseen, ancient and eternal. So I've used this next page in the journal for this because the purpley background colour gives it a sense of magic. But first we'll look at this flip out pocket from the kit, and I've put the magic part of the poem on here. I thought this pocket was good because it has the tree and the clouds, and the tool tag from the kit has a magical feel with the hand and black candle and the face in the mirror in the background, if you can see. And on the back of the tag I've just put a picture of Poe, and then as we flip over the pocket it reveals more of that cloudy sky spattered in what I see as blood. A callback to the Mask of the Red Death, I'm sure. Now on the page itself, as I mentioned, we've got the purple background, and I've added some branches, the red sky and moon, the word secret, black and midnight, and I've put this banner tucked here, more branches, and I've stuck what looks like a bit of an incantation in the background with black texture pasted some trees on top. So in the Valley of Unrest, magic isn't a gift, it's a condition. It's what makes the valley alive but not living, suspended in a kind of eternal twilight. So I wanted my page to hold that feeling of power just below the surface, of beauty too quiet to name. Magic isn't what happens, it's what remains when everything else has gone still. Let it feel like the air before a storm, or the hush of knowing you're not alone. And that is my representations of this week's prompts to go with the poem The Valley of Unrest. And I really hope you enjoyed this. I promise the next one won't be quite as long, but you'll get a letter, a reading of the poem for next week, and 5 more pages. So please do like, comment, share and subscribe. You know I love a chat. Check out the hashtag Poevember25 to see what everyone else is doing, and head to my playlist for my videos from last year. Go to Priscilla's channel and see how you can join in. And I'll be back in 5 days' time with the next poem and prompts. And in the meantime, have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.